we never really knew Brook. We never even knew his original dream. We never knew why he wanted to become a pirate, who he was before he became a pirate, and most importantly, what the world was like during his first life, his original life. For instance, do you realize that the reason that Brook likely knew about the Gods Knights is because Brook was once the leader of a kingdom's military? Meaning, even though we didn't realize it up till now, Brook in his first life would logically have accompanied his nation's king to Marijua for multiple reveries, just as we've seen each nation's king bring their own best soldiers to the recent reverie. And that is just the tip of the iceberg of what Brook's full story seems set to be, as Oda has really been hiding the full story of who Brook is for a long time. This entire time, Brook has been the one Straw Hat that Oda has always kept to the side, generally writing him like a walking gag rather than treating him like a fully fleshed out character. And that's because it was too early. Brook is the one Straw Hat who has already completed an entire rich life story. He's not a work in progress like the rest of the crew. And so Oda chose to write him as a one-dimensional character for so long, because while in reality Brook has the deepest and densest story of any Straw Hat, it was not yet time for us to discover what that full story was. And Oda saved it specifically for this arc. Not just because Brook's past is finally going to become important, but because Brook's music is going to be the key to resolving the Elbaf arc as well. This is what Oda has been holding off on for this character, for an arc where Brook is finally meant to step into the spotlight, not just as the funny, quirky, talking skeleton, but as a man who has lived a full and deeply layered life, whose hidden past can finally help us understand the conflict of today, and whose music can be used as more than just entertainment, but rather as the ultimate means to move the human soul. But before we get into it, make sure to subscribe. So that aside, but first we have Brook has always been by far the most underdeveloped Straw Hat, right from his introduction. Whereas each Straw Hat's primary story arc generally revolved around them as the main character and central focus, for Brook, even in his primary arc, Thriller Bark, he was never really the center of the plot. He became just an additional character whose shadow had to be retrieved, and who could provide some context on Moria and Thriller Bark. In many ways, from the beginning, Brook was already being written as just a side accompanying piece to the rest of the main character Straw Hats, even during his own arc. And notably, where Straw Hats' backstories tend to be the emotional centerpiece of their primary arcs, Brook's backstory was only squeezed in at the very end of Thriller Bark during the epilogue, after the main events of the plot had already resolved, as Brook's own story was never the emotional center of the arc. The only other Straw Hat you could say was never really the emotional center of a specific arc is Jinbei, but Jinbei at least has had several storylines that flesh him out as a character and add depth, whereas for Brook, in the 600 plus chapters following Thriller Bark, the only storyline that actually even bothered to feature any sort of emotional depth to him, past the surface level skull and panty jokes, was Whole Cake Island. And even when it comes to Whole Cake Island, it didn't actually do that much for Brook's character, as having cool moments is not the same as adding depth. I often see readers call Brook the MVP of Whole Cake for scenes such as standing up to Big Mom and breaking Mother Carmel's photo. But while those scenes feature Brook's value to the crew, there is really only one scene in Whole Cake that actually gives Brook some emotional depth. Brook's best scene in Whole Cake is honestly this one, in the wake of Pedro's death. This is the first and only scene in One Piece outside of Thriller Bark where Brook is actually written like a person, someone who feels pain, grief, resentment, and desire for change. This is the one moment where it feels like Brook is more than a skeleton, he is a man. And just like that, it's gone. In Wano, Brook is back to being the quirky corpse that the Straw Hats have on the side. And while the Straw Hats as a whole were generally sidelined during Wano, that went double for Brook, who was off-screened and literally put in a well for all of Act 2. And I don't know if anyone even knows what the hell Brook was doing during Egghead. And consider that on top of all this, despite being the story for 700 chapters now, Brook is the only Straw Hat in all of One Piece who has still never gotten an actual fight. At times it almost began to feel like Brook was simply meant to be a bonus Straw Hat. Not a real, deeply fleshed out main character like the rest, but a quirky gag character who Oda conceived that he decided would be fun to make a permanent addition. Perhaps Brook's sole narrative purpose was to tie up the Laboon loose end, so that the Straw Hats' journey around the globe could end on a nice sentimental reunion with the first character they encountered on the Grand Line. Even Brook's role on the crew, as the musician, is practically symbolic of the character himself. Fun to have around, but definitely not a necessity. Except, that's not actually the case when we look deeper. Maybe Luffy's claims that a musician is in fact essential for his crew do carry some hidden weight. Music has power in One Piece. There is genuine value to it. Just like Brook may seem to be a superficial addition to the crew on the surface at first, the hidden value of the character can only be understood when we delve a little deeper. I have always believed that the Straw Hats are all supposed to be the main characters of the story. I've never accepted the notion that we shouldn't expect more from Brook, because the reality is that there has always been more to this character than we've been getting. It's just that the right time had yet to come. See, the reason that Brook has always been written so fundamentally differently than the rest of the Straw Hats is that, unlike the rest of the crew, Brook is on his second life. For most of the Straw Hats, this journey is where they are forming their identities. This journey is where they are overcoming their flaws, chasing their dreams, and becoming the actualized versions of themselves. But Brook has already lived a complete life as a man once. Brook's original dream was never even to reunite with Laboon, but the fact that we are only now learning that his true dream is one that he long ago fulfilled, to become a pirate, speaks volumes of how much we don't actually know about this character, how much of his true story Oda has hidden from us. Brook already had his own journey, he completed it, he died, and he is now on a second go-around, specifically to close out one loose end. Not for himself, but for the sake of fulfilling a promise to another. The story of Brook has already completed. The character arc complete, the dream achieved, he is simply on his epilogue, while the rest of the Straw Hats are still writing their books. And that is where the genius of Brook as an addition to the Straw Hats comes in. Because what Oda has been saving all along is finally uncovering the details of what happened in Brook's story. Because Brook's story, his true story, comes from a deliberately completely different timeline from the rest of the Straw Hats, a period from over 50 years ago. A period that is now becoming crucial to our understanding of the current story. Oda held off on delving into Brook's character because Brook's full story would reveal too much about the rest of the narrative. All along, Brook was the hidden piece from the past that could make the modern-day story of the main characters work. A completed character, slotted in alongside incomplete characters, generally kept in the background until the time was right for his past to come into play to help complete the main story. We've often taken for granted that Brook likely has a lot of information about the world thanks to his knowledge of the past because Oda has kept Brook quiet about it. But as we know, the past in One Piece is crucial to understanding the present. And so the key to so much of our understanding of One Piece has been sailing on the ship with us all along. It now makes sense why Brook knows about the God's Knights. Brook was once the leader of a battle convoy for a kingdom. The kings of nations go to Marijua to attend the reverie, and all kings bring their own royal guard with them on this trip. As such, if Brook was at the head of a kingdom's military, then he would of course have been one of the accompanying soldiers alongside his nation's king to a reverie in the past. This was shown to us very clearly in the recent reverie that just took place. Brook knows about the God's Knights because he has been to the land of the gods, where the God's Knights are the primary military force. This leads to a slew of other questions. What happened to the nation that Brook once represented? What happened to Gunko? Could she even have been a princess of said nation, who, much like Kuma, was turned into a slave of the gods and had her autonomy taken from her? What was the world like back when celestial dragon hunting tournaments were a regular event? What was the world like when the Rocks pirates reigned supreme? When the rookie Roger began to make his name? Brook has seen secrets of the world that have been kept from us for a reason, because both we and the Straw Hats were not meant to know them up till now. Oda planted the key to the past on the ship all along and buried it under a mountain of skull and panty jokes so that we would never stop to ask why Brook doesn't actually reveal that much about himself, so that we would never question who Brook really is underneath that goofy exterior, or why Oda decided that a 90-year-old man was a necessary addition to the Straw Hats crew in the first place. But if the first unique aspect of Brook's character is that he has already lived an entire complete life story prior to meeting the Straw Hats, the second is that he is the musician of the crew. And it is actually both of these points that are going to finally be deeply relevant in this storyline. Music is actually going to matter to the story of Elbaf, because music is the key to the soul in One Piece. One of the most underrated bits of symbolic genius by Oda is designing the musician of the crew as someone who is undead, but is kept alive only through the power of his soul, as it represents the profound connection between music and the soul in this story. Every celebration in One Piece is brought to life through music. Being sake encapsulates the spirit of adventure and freedom that drives our protagonists. The very heartbeat of Nika, the sun god of liberation, comes with the rhythm of drums. Music has special meaning in One Piece. It's almost transcendental in a sense. It's not just frivolous entertainment, it speaks to the very themes of freedom, joy, harmony, and adventure that tie the story together. The whole point is that music, in many ways, is what makes us human. It is representative of all the things that make life worth living. And that's precisely why Oda chose a literal skeleton to be the embodiment of music. And Brook's music is so magical that it literally, not figuratively, but literally can move the soul. We saw this first in Whole Cake Island, where Brook turned out to be the hard counter to Big Mom's soul powers. Brook could actually affect the souls of the homies, leading even Big Mom to respect him as the Soul King. And this power of Brook's, this power of music to affect the soul, is so crucially important in the final saga of One Piece, because as we're seeing in recent arcs, an extremely prominent theme that is developing is the idea of the soul in general. This is the saga about defying the celestial dragons, the gods of the world, and the idea that is being reiterated over and over is that no power can crush the human spirit, because the soul will always remain intact no matter how much the mind and body are subjugated. We've seen this last arc with Kuma, as even as a machine with all consciousness erased, the power of his soul drove him to fight for his daughter. And we're seeing it now, as Gunko, despite being made into a seemingly obedient puppet by Imu, somehow still retains a piece of her original self, a piece that could never be eliminated, not even by God himself. And that piece is now being awakened thanks to Brook. Why? Because Brook is a musician. Even before Gunko ever saw Brook in Elbaf, she was clearly already being moved somewhere deep in her soul by his music. Everything about Gunko on the surface made her seem like a hateful celestial dragon shill, someone who believes all other beings are inferior, who desires the complete subjugation of every species, and yet there was this one part of her that for some reason did not conform. Her taste in music stood against everything that she seemingly believed in on the surface. While consciously, Gunko strictly upheld the order of the world, somewhere deep within her, beyond her own understanding, she seemed to be drawn to the idea of a new world. Was it the message or the musician that moved her? At this point, it seems as though it was likely both. The very same musician that enthralled her as a child, that moved her soul decades and decades ago, back when she had her humanity and individuality, that same musician is once again reaching her today, his song cutting through even God's control to reach what God never could, the soul. and I'm particularly excited for Brook's role in this as, remember, every major One Piece arc in the post-time skip has featured a key character on the antagonist side defecting and aiding the protagonists instead. In Dressrosa it was Viola, in Whole Cake it was Pudding, in Wano it was Denjiro, in Egghead it was Stussy, and now here, in Elbaf, it is very clearly going to be Gunko. The true Gunko has been swallowed up by Imu and turned into a puppet, but she's still in there deep down. It's likely that just as in past arcs, Gunko changing sides is going to be crucial to the heroes surviving and succeeding. But in this particular arc, that change can only be brought about by one character. Only Brook and his music will be able to reach Gunko's soul and bring back her true self. Meaning finally, Brook's music is going to become a pivotal plot point in the story. Much like Nami's navigation in Skypiea or Sanji's cooking in Whole Cake Island, Elbaf's narrative is going to be riding on a major musical performance from Brook before it's all said and done. Because we know that at this point it is still too early for Luffy to be able to defeat Imu. As such, it's possible that in the end, considering Imu can possess Gunko, the only one who will actually be able to drive Imu away in the final battle will be Brook, exercising Imu through the power of music, much like we saw in Whole Cake. And we know this is coming because Oda has made sure that Gunko has not yet heard Brook's music live. If just hearing a recording of New World can already capture her soul to some degree, and simply seeing Brook brings memories of her true self flooding back, well then an actual live performance by the Soul King himself, well that is absolutely guaranteed to be the moment that the true Gunko awakens again once and for all. There is a point, it seems, that Oda is bent on repeatedly making about the human soul throughout the final saga, and how some of the things that make us human can never be taken away. In Egghead, the message was about love, and in Elbaf, it seems as though Oda is going to take the angle of the power of music, as again, music in One Piece symbolizes freedom, joy, harmony, and everything that makes life worth living. It is the ultimate representation of the human spirit. So overall, Elbaf is likely set to be Brook's greatest arc in the story. Yes, even more so than Thriller Bark, as this is finally the arc where we will get to uncover the full depth of who Brook was before he was a Straw Hat, a door that Oda could not open until the time was just right. Finally, we will get to see Brook written as a genuine character rather than a walking gag, as we get to know the man that he once was. And even more importantly, Brook will finally get to have a major impact on the plot of the arc through the one thing that is unique to him and him alone in the crew, his music. That which was once considered an unnecessary luxury for the Straw Hats will actually become the key to resolving the entire conflict of Elbaf. So if you have ideas on what happened in Brook and Gunko's past, then let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, then definitely like and subscribe.